channel to Manafort for Russian intelligence services. The report also said that they could never discern exactly what was going on there, why Trump's campaign chairman was shoveling all that Trump campaign material to a Russian intelligence officer. They said they never got to the bottom of it because even though, quote, Manafort was interviewed approximately a dozen times, he lied consistently during these interviews about one issue in particular, his interactions with Kilimnik, the Russian intelligence officer at the center of the committee's investigation. These lies violated Paul Manafort's plea agreement, which obligated him to be truthful in his cooperation with the government. Those lies therefore exposed Manafort to a more severe prison sentence than his plea agreement contemplated. Manafort's obfuscation of the truth surrounding Konstantin Kilimnik was particularly damaging to the committee's investigation because it effectively foreclosed direct insight into a series of interactions and communications which represent the single most direct tie between senior Trump campaign officials and the Russian intelligence services. That was last fall. That was the Senate Intelligence Committee's report. That report mentioned Konstantin Kilimnik more than 750 times by name. Well, again, that came out last fall. Now, in very short order, we know quite a bit more, right? Because that was in the fall. Then there was the election. Then in late December, Trump pardoned Paul Manafort for his crimes. So big picture, that means Manafort effectively got away with whatever it was he was doing with Konstantin Kilimnik to help Trump without ever telling investigators the truth about it. Trump effectively rewarded him for not spilling the beans about his work with a Russian intelligence officer while he was running Trump's 2016 campaign. Trump got him off the hook because he never squealed. That pardon was late December. In February, again, we saw the FBI suddenly slap a $250,000 reward out there for any information leading to Konstantin Kilimnik's arrest. And now we know, as of today, that what was going on behind the scenes in the interim is that the intelligence community was concluding that Kilimnik was not only involved in the Russian government's interference to try to help Trump get into the White House in 2016, he was also a key part of their efforts this time around to interfere in our election in 2020 to try to get Trump reelected. This is the declassified report that just came out today. Quote, we assess that President Putin and the Russian state authorized and conducted influence operations against the 2020 U.S. presidential election aimed at denigrating President Biden and the Democratic Party, supporting former President Trump, undermining public confidence in the electoral process, and exacerbating socio-political divisions in the United States. Quote, we have high confidence in these judgments because a range of Russian state and proxy actors who all serve the Kremlin's interests worked to affect U.S. public perceptions. We also have high confidence because of the consistency of themes in Russia's influence efforts across the various influence actors and throughout the campaign. Quote, a key element of Moscow's strategy this election cycle was its use of people linked to Russian intelligence to launder influence narratives, including misleading or unsubstantiated allegations against President Biden through U.S. media organizations, U.S. officials, and prominent U.S. individuals, some of whom were close to former President Trump and his administration. Quote, the primary effort the intelligence community uncovered revolved around a narrative that Russian actors began spreading as early as 2014, alleging corrupt ties between President Biden, his family, other U.S. officials, and Ukraine. A network of Ukraine-linked individuals, including Russian influence agent Konstantin Kilimnik, who are also connected to Russian intelligence services, took steps throughout the election cycle to damage U.S. ties to Ukraine, to denigrate President Biden and his candidacy, and to benefit former President Trump's prospects for re-election. We assess this network also sought to discredit the Obama administration by emphasizing accusations of corruption by U.S. officials and to falsely blame Ukraine for interfering in the 2016 U.S. presidential election instead of Russia. Andrei Derkach, Konstantin Kilimnik, and their associates sought to use prominent U.S. persons and media conduits to launder their narratives to U.S. officials and audiences. These Russian proxies met with and provided materials to Trump administration-linked U.S. persons to advocate for formal investigations. They hired a U.S. firm to petition U.S. officials. They attempted to make contact with several senior U.S. officials. They also made contact with established U.S. media figures and helped produce a documentary that aired on a U.S. television network in January 2020. This is the intelligence community's unclassified report out today on Russia taking a second run at us, taking a second run at a U.S. election, again in 2020, like they did in 2016, this time to try to keep Donald Trump in the White House and to try to undermine Joe Biden's chances of getting in. Along the way, if they could make Americans no longer believe in the sanctity of our democracy and make us hate each other more than we even already do, well, so much the better. That's icing on the cake, right? I mean, the efforts to get a documentary on U.S. television based on Russian disinformation, to make contact with prominent U.S. persons and launder Russian disinformation against Joe Biden through prominent persons and U.S. officials and U.S. media figures. That is quite transparently about the trash and slime that Rudy Giuliani and pro-Trump Republican congressmen and senators dragged around during the 2020 campaign for months, to try to make it seem like Joe Biden had some kind of Ukraine-related corruption scheme staining his reputation when he did not. Those allegations were not only false, the U.S. intelligence community has concluded they were concocted by the Russian government as deliberate disinformation to try to help Trump in 2020. Russian agents used various U.S. officials and entities to launder that disinformation, but it was directed from the Kremlin. It was directed specifically by Russian President Vladimir Putin to try to get Trump reelected. And although he is not mentioned by name in the report, both the New York Times and the Washington Post point out the obvious tonight that Rudy Giuliani clearly is one of the major conduits for this Russian disinformation that's described in the report, especially since one of the named Russian intelligence operatives in the report, Andrei Derkach, met repeatedly with Rudy Giuliani in 2020, fed him all sorts of material that Giuliani used in various media appearances. Giuliani continued to defend that guy even after the guy was sanctioned by the U.S. government last year as a Russian agent. The Post notes tonight that Giuliani's, quote, repeated meetings with the suspected Russian agent came under scrutiny by U.S. officials. That is true. Whatever you think about Rudy Giuliani's efforts to launder Russian government disinformation to try to help Vladimir Putin interfere in our election on Trump's behalf for a second time, Rudy Giuliani's involvement in these schemes has attracted scrutiny from U.S. investigators. And frankly, that is another lit firecracker that is buzzing on the doorstep of the new Attorney General, Merrick Garland, right now. I mean, put the other piece of this together with it. One of the things we know about Rudy Giuliani and part of the scrutiny that he received for his role in this foreign influence operation against our country, against our last election. One of the things we know about that, as first reported here on this show, is that SDNY prosecutors sought a search warrant for Rudy Giuliani's electronic devices as part of the criminal investigation into Mr. Giuliani's actions. As we first reported, it was Trump appointees at Maine Justice who kiboshed that and would not allow SDNY prosecutors to execute that search warrant against Giuliani. So where does that stand now, Mr. Attorney General? I mean, the criminal investigation of the president's attorney, Mr. Giuliani, is reportedly still a live thing. I mean, one of the messes, the still stinking messes that the new Attorney General, Merrick Garland, is going to have to handle inside the Justice Department now is the from above, apparently artificial interference and shutdown of the criminal investigation into Rudy Giuliani by Trump appointees. While we now know the intelligence community was apparently hot on his heels for his role in this latest Russian attack on our country. The Bill Barr Justice Department quashed investigative steps in the investigation into Rudy Giuliani, while we now know the intelligence community had identified him as a key conduit for a Putin-directed Russian intelligence operation to interfere in our election for a second straight time. They've got a $250,000 reward on one of the named people involved in that scheme. Rudy Giuliani under scrutiny for his role in that scheme. Bill Barr blocking the search warrants that were part of that investigation? What happens to that now? Hope you were enjoying your first week at the new job, sir. I hope it is not too stressful. Congressman Adam Schiff, chair of the Intelligence Committee.